vais me donner la parole, tout simplement, puisque j'ai décidé d'intervenir aussi aujourd'hui. C'est un peu expérimental pour moi, puisque je sors complètement de ma zone de confort. Et c'est un sujet, alors on reste dans la musique, mais on va aller plutôt du côté pop, très pop et très mainstream. Et je vais donner cette conférence en anglais en essayant de faire du mieux que je peux avec mon accent. Excusez-moi juste une seconde, j'ai besoin de ça. Et j'ai besoin... So as I was saying, it's a bit experimental for me to try my hand at a very different subject. So, in September 2017, pop star Amuro Namie announced her retirement at the age of 40. This was followed by a frenzy in the media, who soon named her heroine of the Heisei era. Indeed, this announcement incited the public to look back at the meaning of her 25 years of career, her status as an icon of the mid-90s, and how she became a symbol of emancipation and independence for a whole generation, especially of women. I will argue in this paper that her success is due to the interweaving of the rupture she introduces with the traditional figure of the idol and the symbolic transformational capacities of the otherness she embodies. However, I will show that this success is achieved not because she is a radical figure, far from it, but because she subtly navigates between her Japanness, Okinawanness, Blackness, and even Westernness to convey the idea of a transnational appeal. I would even like to suggest that she acts as a cultural broker while mediating Blackness through both her Okinawan identity and her ethnical mixity. In doing so, I will mainly focus on her first peak period, that is to say the years going from 1995 to 1997, even though her early biography will be helpful to understand the further construction of Blackness in her career. In the last part, I will also dwell upon the specific question of her relation to Okinawa in the last years before her retirement. In August 1996, Amuro Namie is just about to turn 19, and she breaks several records with her first solo album, Sweet 19 Blues, selling more than 3 million copies. TV reports about this young Japanese performer are then being broadcasted on international TV channels, and they show the streets of Shibuya, the center of pop culture in Tokyo, full of women trying to mimic her. Not only do they sport the same high-heeled boots and miniskirts than she does, but they also tan their skin and bleach their hair to achieve a non-conventional look. These Amura, a subgenre of the Gyaru style, are actually part of a cultural phenomenon that will reach an even more wider range of young women and high school students. As many female artists have stated lately, in the mid-90s, Amuro was the woman everyone aspired to be. One of the important features that shaped Amuro's image in the mid-90s was her embracement of Blackness, not only in her music videos, but also in live performances, magazines, and merchandising. She was introduced as an artist inspired by Black spirits and aesthetics. To give you a better understanding of what is at stake in Amuro's image and how her otherness was standing out in the context of a so-called homogeneous Japan, I'd like to show you an excerpt of a music video that I tend to think as a manifesto of a relation to Black. The presence of Black American figures in the media and the adoption of Black styles are not entirely new to the Japan of the 90s. The Black boom of the 80s had seen a proliferation of Black bodies, especially in commercials, with the notable difference that they were mostly male bodies. I'm referring here to the studies of John Russell and Nina Kornitz on the consumption and fetishization of Black male bodies and sexuality. Kornitz recalls that the American occupation produced a metaphorical feminization of Japan through its subordinate positioning. Black American soldiers, who were then both in a dominant position because they were American and in a subordinate position because they were colored, became the symbol of phallic empowerment. Of course, this also has to do with the preconception of a powerful and primordial Black sexuality. One of the consequences of this Black boom was the apparition of Japanese men who styled themselves after Black American men, including hairstyles and skin color. They are often referred as black facers, in one single word to mark the difference with the black faces in two words of minstrels, even though, as John Russell states, one cannot be thought without the other, since the tradition of blackface has existed in Japan since Commodore Matthew Perry held several minstrel shows in the country in 1854. In the field of music, let us remember that in the 80s, the gospelers band Rats and Star were performing in blackface makeup, reminiscent of the minstrel shows. It should be noted, however, that at the time, letters of protest arrived to the media, and those performers had to explain themselves. They said they just wanted to get as close to Black people as possible. John Russell writes, by mimicking the body, outward form, the soul is thought to follow, as self is transcended and becomes the other. I think this is a key idea, and we have to keep it in mind since it could be relevant for the analysis that will follow, mimicking the outside to transform the inside. In the early and mid-90s, blackfacers, men and women called b-boys and b-girls, who darkened their skin in tanning salons, could be found in hip-hop circles and Japanese clubs frequented by Black Americans. But as Joe Wood mentions, they didn't share the caricatural look of the old minstrels. They looked real. He asserted that one of the girls he met could have been a Dominican high school student from the Bronx. Other kind of black faces include Ganguro and Yamamba, subgenres of Gyaru, but I won't say more about them since they appeared later in the 90s. Some say it was even under the influence of Amuro Namie herself. Nina Kornitz also writes that even though they are dark-skinned, the question of blackness is not really relevant to analyze them. Anyways, we are here talking about specific street fashions and subcultures. So what about the mainstream pop music industry? Well, in the early and mid-90s, it was mostly men who tried to achieve a black look, as for example, funk and soul singers Kubota Toshinobu or MC80. So what Amuro Namie brings in the mid-90s to the pop industry is very new, since it associates blackness with female empowerment, but in a different way than before. Indeed, in the 80s, early 90s, women were liberating themselves of the hegemony of Japanese men by having Black American men as lovers. That was made popular by Yamada Amy's novels. With Amuro Namie, emancipation will be achieved through the performance of a modern feminine blackness. What is even more important, and which makes this performance of Blackness particularly effective, is that Amuro herself is not a Japanese mainlander, not even fully Asian. She is 3/4 Okinawan and 1/4 Western, white American. This background plays a part in both Amuro's own perception of Blackness in relation with the experience of being mixed and how the Japanese public saw her. The general consensus was actually that Amuro's look was very exotic, and it was clear that she was not 100% Japanese. Indeed, Amuro Namie was born in 1977 in Naha, the capital city of the Okinawa prefecture, of an Okinawan father and a half Okinawan mother. Her grandfather, who she never knew and her mother herself never knew, was an American soldier stationed in Okinawa, and her grandmother a cleaning lady in a military base. Amuro's mother, Taira Emiko, in her 1998 biography has given details about her life as a half-mixed person in post-war Okinawa. Children born of these biracial relationships are still often victims of bullying and harassment. As Mitzi Uehara Carter underlines, Hafu have even been more discriminated in Okinawa than in mainland Japan, because we are a constant memory of war and occupation in a landscape where the fragments of war are still visible. As a consequence, Taira, with her fair skin, her Western features, and her light reddish hair, was always called America. School children would tell her to go back to her country. So without a doubt, this experience of discrimination was passed to her daughter, even though the latter was only 1/4 American. Actually, something very strange happened, according to Taira. Whereas her two first children share the same fair skin as hers, Namie is in comparison very dark-skinned. As a child, Amuro Namie was constantly worried about this darkness of her skin, and she would ask her mother, "Why do I have a different skin color than my siblings?" Her elder brother would tease her in response, "You're the kid of a black person." This joke in the context of Okinawa is not insignificant. Even though several scholars like Onishi Uichiro have studied, there existed a collaborative space in post-war Okinawa between local activists and black American GIs, sharing the same fight against white American hegemony, most Okinawans saw the black dissidents as a problem, since it could generate fights, violence, and endanger local lives. Moreover, white GIs were disseminating the idea that black men were sexual predators and criminals. As John Russell recalls, it was also asserted that black soldiers had dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Very negative preconceptions were consequently attached to black Americans. That even led in post-war Okinawa to a color line in the city of Koza. Certain areas were considered black, and brothels, prostitutes, would either be solely dedicated to black and white GIs. So being half-black in Okinawa was not the easiest thing for a child. Several of them were even just abandoned. Amuro's mother was also worried that her daughter could look Filipina. Filipinos had mainly arrived in Okinawa as workers for the American military, and while I'm less familiar with this history, I guess they were victims of discrimination too. In every case, the question of race and color are at stake in Amuro Namie's biography, and it is likely that she was harassed herself to develop such worries about her so-called darkness. And you can see in this picture with several children that she easily stands out. She is right in the middle. At the age of 11, Amuro enters the Okinawa Jos School, which was founded in 1983 by Masayuki Makino. And the rhetorics behind this school are actually pretty interesting. The place was dedicated to acting, singing, and dancing, and sought to provide body empowerment through dance. Makino had very specific views on Japanese education, which he found oppressive and squeezing all the imagination out of students. In contrast, he said he valued in his school natural inventiveness. After being taught a few basics, students did not learn any choreography, but were invited to express themselves freely. Makino also says that he prefers purity to cuteness, but the purity that he defends is not the kind of innocent purity that defines traditional Japanese pop idols, which, according to Aoyagi Hiroshi, consist in a form of adolescent femininity designed to primarily serve the interests of male audiences. The purity that Makino values is a driving force, finally not so far from the idea of purity of heart, a stereotype associated with Okinawa, but that also serves as a tool of resistance for many artists of the island. So this purity and intuitiveness, primitiveness is not that far, were the keys to self-affirmation in this school. And in the case of young female dancers, they were translated into sexualized performances mimicking Black American artists. Let us not forget that Black American music was in circulation in Okinawa more than in mainland Japan because of the presence of Black GIs who created local radios and were an audience for it. Makino decided to use these models and nurture his young performers with music videos of Janet Jackson, Paula Abdul, and many others. Incidentally, the case of Paula Abdul is interesting since she was marketed in the 80s as a Black American artist, or at least half Black, and it became very controversial when she publicly announced that she was not Black at all in the 90s. But well, this is another story, and you can check this issue of Ebony on who's Black and who's not. This choice that Makino, who is actually not Okinawan at all, made was not trivial at all, given that he supported a pro-Okinawa discourse defending the need for the Ryukyu to emancipate from the mainland and for Okinawan artists to exceed the national Japanese market. The young Amuro Namie became then a fan of Janet Jackson and inspired to be like her. Chances are that her growing interest in Black American culture was also related to her concerns towards her skin color. Black American female artists gave her the opportunity to convert this burden into a positive and affirmative model. So when Amuro makes her debut at the age of 15 and leaves Okinawa, contrary to the other members of her band, she artificially maintains her tanning in the less sunny Tokyo. I will not linger on these early and successful years where the band called the Super Monkeys first tried to enter the Uchina pop category, that is to say the Okinawan pop category, by incorporating karate into their dance moves. This strategy, thought it was not effective, leaned on the Okinawa boom of the early 90s, which ironically remains characterized by the song Shimauta of mainland band The Boom, that included lyrics about Okinawan traditional instruments. I'll just show you a small excerpt of this song so you can get an idea of this fusion of modern and Okinawan music. This was a very popular song. So when Amuro finally achieved success in 1995 with her Italian Eurobeat song Try Me, Watashi wo Shinjite, media sought to define her race and question her family. Taira Emiko only knew that her father was white American, but some members of her family said maybe he had British origins, others said maybe Italian. Whether it was Amuro's management or the journalist's doing, the Italian option was chosen and the American part completely erased. We can wonder if the Italian-American label seemed too unclear to a Japanese audience, or if it was the ethnicity itself that mattered, or if erasing the word American in the context of Okinawa was the safest option to avoid any negative association. Maybe also Italy had a more exotic appeal and could relate to fashion and the current musical trends. As for Amuro's Okinawan background, it was of course seen as exotic by mainlanders, and her tanning felt as typical of the island, as Okinawans are considered to be a darker shade of yellow. Amuro's success soon led her to work with top producer Komuro Tetsuya at the end of 1995. After he wrote 2 dance songs for her, Komuro asked Amuro what kind of music she really wanted to do. The young woman answered, black music like Janet Jackson's. Komuro would have then written Don't Wanna Cry, the first song you heard. But it seems like Komuro had already thought about Amuro's potential relation to blackness. Being her producer, he did not just write songs for her, but also contributed in building her image. Let's follow the evolution of her videos. Amuro's first solo music video, Body Feels Exit, a dance song, features a stripped black male body. We can probably refer here to the kind of fetishization Nina Kornitz examines, the liberation of Japanese women through the consumption of such bodies. On the other hand, we also have to remember that these aesthetics originated from Eurodance and techno of the early 90s, which were performed by black vocalists, and that could make the analysis more complex. The second music video, Chase the Chance, marks a transition and I would say a transfer of power. The stripped black body is still here, but it's completed with a urban hip-hop figure. In techno of the early 90s, there could be rap verses, but they were usually performed by male singers. Here, in this acid house track, Amuro takes the lead. And she doesn't deliver the same cute performance as Yuri in Japan's early rap hit, Journée, but a strong, assertive performance that provides empowerment to women while breaking off with the idea of the innocent idol. I'll soon get to this, but I wish first to show you an excerpt of both videos.
私のバレーそこら辺の小分けた外れすっごくおしゃれなバレーで愛は私の方から一目惚れ若いのに会社では凄腕仕事遊びなんだって完璧で派手な車って玉のやつもうなんだってあれみたいな時代だからもたもたしてたもんだから XG だけじゃ足りなそうだから体で話そう誰のせいでもないから怒らないけどね近頃つまらないつまらなければおかしくすればいいチャンスでスタップダウンどうやって君は夢を守るの抱えきれない私の腹
Don't Wanna Cry and You Are My Sunshine both embrace the idea of the transformational qualities of blackness, but I would argue that it doesn't happen through passive and simple consumption. Both videos feature black American characters in a subordinate position, cleaning lady, waitress, barman, housemaid. In a wide American context, Amuro could have been seen as a dominant character, but her Japanness and even more her Okinawanness places her in a sort of Afro-Asian alliance against the model of white hegemony. The mutational process in those music videos doesn't erase the black figures to only transform Amuro, but changes all the characters. There is no consumption in the sense of an absorption, but more the creation of a transnational space where identities are redefined through contact with each other. This is at least the idea conveyed by these videos that position Amuro Namie herself as a transnational figure whose Okinawanness and mixed ethnicity allow to navigate beyond the barriers of a so-called homogeneous Japan. This transnational capacity is confirmed in 1997 pop electronica track How to Be a Girl. The video takes place in the subway and sees Amuro navigate between a multiple range of identities, some of them defying the norms of race, gender, and mainstream culture. As she walks from one carriage to another, she also slowly transforms herself. The end of the video reveals that it was all an illusion, but an illusion uncovering the fluidity and transformative potential of one's identity. This otherness that Amuro Namie performs, this capacity of transformation, is not limited to the idea of race. It also challenges the kind of non-threatening femininity that Japanese idols usually embody. We owe here to Aoyagi Hiroshi for his excellent ethnographical study of the subject. In the 70s, 80s, there is an idol boom in Japan. These girls next door, whose appearance, ability, and charm are just above average, appeal to a male audience because of their cuteness and vulnerability. Amuro, on the other hand, is the archetype of the post-idol movement, displaying a vibrantly sexual personality that defies the hegemonic masculinity. It's not a mere coincidence if Amuro's fans in the mid-90s, if among the fans there was a big proportion of women, when men thought her sexual appeal was threatening. Women interviewed by Aoyagi tended to think that she played a part in feminine emancipation. One of them said, "It gives a woman like myself a sense of control over her body. She can express herself in the way she wants to do it. without worrying about how to satisfy men's desire. But dance was not the only way how Amuro distinguished herself from the idol idiom. From the beginning, she decided that she wanted to be seen as an artist and refused to constantly keep smiling. In most photo shoots and performances, she delivers a very cool and detached face. If there had always been among idols a rivalry between the cute kawaii side and the cool kakkoi side, as for Matsuda Seiko and Nakamori Akina, Amuro takes it to another level. But, and this is where Amuro is able to act as a cultural broker and negotiate the values of change in Japanese society, she is not a radical figure. She won't assert the same kind of transgressive sexuality and maturity than someone like rock singer Shina Ringo. When Amuro leaves the scene, she can act kawaii, but it's not the over-exaggerated cuteness of idols. She, for example, never speaks in the third person when referring to herself, which is a childlike manner to speak in Japan and is supposed to convey cuteness, but shows a shy, modest, and easygoing personality, qualities that are valued by the Japanese public and that besides enhance her rhetorics of transformation. She becomes another on stage. These adjustments, far from limiting her influence, extended it to a whole generation of women. I interviewed one of them who told me, I was in a Catholic school where it was forbidden to dye your hair, put some makeup, shorten your skirts, or wear loose socks. During summers, we would roll up our sleeves and just stay tanning under the sun. It was a way of resisting, even if now it sounds silly, and she was clearly making a reference to Amuro Namie. What I'd like to emphasize is that this space of resistance opened by Amuro was new because of its extent. Before that, blackness and otherness as tools of resistance were limited to small circles, but it was also effective because it resulted from the convergence of multiple factors. It wasn't just Amuro's attitude, dancing, and sexiness. It wasn't just her use of blackness and its transformational capacities. It wasn't just because she was Okinawan and mixed. It was because each of these elements supported and reinforced the other. Amuro Namie's alliance with blackness is indeed justified because she's Okinawan. She carries for the public a form of otherness, and the space itself of Okinawa is a transnational space that induces a concrete proximity with Black Americans. James Robertson, followed by Carolyn Stevens, asserts that Okinawan rock music was considered more authentic by mainlanders because bands were performing before an American audience. The Black American presence in Okinawa creates the same kind of authentication in the case of Amuro. Now we can discuss what effects Amuro had on the perception of Black Americans and Okinawans in Japan. I'm not sure that in the first case she made more than helping the rise of Black artists and models in the Japanese media, such as Naomi Campbell, who was very present in the late 90s, early 2000s. But we can wonder what was her impact on Hafu, biracial Japanese, and their self-esteem. I've tried to reach two Hafu singers to ask them the question, but unfortunately I was unsuccessful in getting a response. But there are two interesting cases. Crystal Kay, who's half Black American and a fan of Amuro Namie since elementary school, and Olivia Lovekin, who's half Okinawan and attended the same school as Amuro. But I truly wonder how the success of Amuro, a mixed young woman from Okinawa in the context of the so-called homogeneous Japan, was interpreted by them. Could it have been read as a demonstration that there was also room for their distinctive transnational identities? Indeed, as Mitzi Uehara Carter underlines, we have to be careful about essentializing the perception of blackness in Japan and imprisoning it into the sole ideas of fetishization and passive consumption. Ethnographic studies could help offering new narratives that take into account the plurality of experiences. As for Okinawa, I'd like to take the example of Okinawan artist Teruya Yuken, who started in 2009 a series of Bingata paintings entitled Heroes, Bingata being an Okinawan traditional technique of dyed cloth using stencils. The first Okinawan hero he chose was Amuro Namie, stating that even though he was not a fan of her music, her constant presence was kind of like the North Star in the sky. This is a thought that seems to be shared by many Okinawans. Amuro being the most famous celebrity from the island, including committed artists of the Uchina pop and rock scene. For mainlanders I've spoken with, Amuro is also a symbol of Okinawa who transcended the exotic appeal of the island to make it cool and modern. While it could be objected that her music doesn't promote Okinawa's distinctiveness and is assimilated to mainstream pop, we could also interpret it as an assertion that Okinawans are not confined into expectations and can convoke their identity whenever they want to, according to the place and moment. But nevertheless, Teruya has always wondered about Amuro's thoughts on politics. He remembers the moment when he saw TV images of protests against Prime Minister Abe's security bill that redefined the military posture of Japan, while Amuro's face was floating around in Shibuya in 2015. Using a 2006 image that he defines as the Tokyo Amuro Namie, he tries through Bingata to make visible the Okinawan Amuro who could not be indifferent to these matters. While moving and changing the size of certain parts of her face, he seeks the resemblance with his cousin, classmate, childhood friend, and re-indigenizes her. It's true that Amuro has long remained silent about politics. In 2000, when the G8 summit was held in Okinawa, Prime Minister Obuchi asked Amuro Namie to sing the official summit song. It's interesting to watch both images of her performance and the protests that happened back then. In the performance that I'm going to show you, you will see a glorified image of Okinawa as a peaceful transnational space with Black American dancers and famous Okinawan players of Senshin and Taiko surrounding Amuro, while outside there is an opposition to the military presence of the United States in Okinawa. I'd like to argue that in the final years of her career, Amuro still took sides, but in a subtle way. She highly promoted tourism in Okinawa and gave a final concert in the island, generating a big economic boost. This is not insignificant since Okinawa is the poorest prefecture of Japan. Her popularity among Okinawans even made journalists wonder about her possible influence on the gubernatorial race. When Governor Onaga Takeshi suddenly died this year, Amuro expressed her condolences and acknowledged how much Onaga had contributed to Okinawa. The latter wanted to put an end to the American presence in Okinawa. Some said that these words convinced many citizens to vote for Tamaki Deni, who pursues the same goal. Tamaki's opponents themselves, during the race, jokingly said, but we know that jokes are not only jokes, they lie on something. The only thing that worries us now is the steps that will be taken by Amuro Namie. As a conclusion, I just would like to insist once again on the role of Amuro Namie as a cultural broker who has been able to bring the potentiality of renewed feminine transnational identity in the Japanese norm and to show the so-called minorities, Okinawans and Hafu, that they could also become models for the dominant mainland. In other words, she might have contributed in reducing the gap of otherness while playing with its transformational capacities. Thank you for your attention. peut répondre à une ou deux questions rapidement, comme nous sommes très en retard. We are very late. So if you have maybe one or two questions quickly. If not, we can just have a very small break. And if you feel like asking me something, you can do it during this small, like 10-15 minutes break before hearing Hiromi talking about Noguchi Isamu, if that's fine with you.